on in. All righty, gorgeous. Well, yeah, thank you again for coming. Genuinely appreciate it. My name is Hazel Hayes. This is Aparna Nancherla.
Hello.
And yeah, we're just going to have a little chat about our work, about writing, about feelings maybe. I feel like feelings are going to come up probably because they do. Yeah, relevant feelings. And read a couple little excerpts and take some questions. And I believe there's people watching at home as well. So hello.
Hello.
Yeah, we'll just dive on in.
Yeah.
We don't know each other very well.
We met one time.
We met one time, and this is actually our first actual probably conversation.
Yeah, which feels very natural.
It's nice. It's nice. Sometimes I've done these kinds of things with people I know very well already, and it's almost harder because you're asking questions you already know the answer to.
Right.
But in this case, I really don't know.
And we have not finished each other's books.
Not fully finished because we're very busy women.
Yeah, but I thought we should just name it instead of letting people guess.
No, for sure. We did speak briefly. I called you the day to be like, I have not finished your book.
Yeah.
And she was like, I have not finished your book.
But
that's good.
But I was listening to it on the ride over here.
You were listening to me reading it?
Because you read it and it's so good. It really puts you in it.
Thank you. Yeah. I feel like I'm way more Irish when I'm reading as well.
I'm not going to lie.
It's a different
I love an accent.
Who doesn't love an accent? So yes, your book, which by the way, it's one of those titles that like I'm annoyed I didn't come up with this by myself. Unreliable narrator, and it's about imposter syndrome. And I'm like, that's so clever. I wish I had thought of this. But diving straight in, the way that you talk about imposter syndrome is so real. I found myself reading it being like, do I have this? I feel like if I did, I'd be like, oh, hard relate. But instead, I feel like someone slightly on the outside understanding it more from your perspective.
Do you feel like it's something you don't deal with?
Don't at all, but definitely not to the levels that you're describing in the book. I think I've definitely had that feeling of like, I'm having it right now, honestly. You're sort of sitting in a room full of people looking and you're like, why are you looking at me? Like, what did I do? I've had that thing of getting the job or getting published or getting the thing and sort of being worried it's not good enough still.
Yes.
I actually, maybe I do have it now that I'm saying it. I had a thing where my publisher, so the Out of Love came out in the UK, with a crowdfunding publisher called Unbound.
Oh, cool.
Because no one would have me. So I crowdfunded it. And then it did well. And then Penguin Random House picked it up in the US. And I remember when I got really good feedback from them, from my editor there, especially Cassidy Sachs, great name. And she was saying all these wonderful things. And then I convinced myself that they probably say really nice things about shit books too.
Basically anything they're championing, they have to be positive.
Yeah, so what I did was try to convince myself that my publisher is an idiot so that I could believe that I'm not good enough. You know what I mean? Instead of just like...
Yeah, it's very Groucho Marx, like I would not want to be a member of any club that would have me as a member.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I feel that way too, where... I was lucky enough to sell the book just based off of like a rough outline and the idea. And it's like, why not write a book about self-doubt? I'm like so good at it. I've been experiencing it my whole life. And then, it turns out self-doubt is not a very great collaborator. Because when I was writing the book, I was like, oh, it seems like you really don't want me to finish. and I think that's kind of fair though. Like, I honestly feel like it would have been more, like I would have had more integrity to write a book about imposter syndrome, and then it just like is like half of it is blank,
Yeah, there's so many jokes you could have made.
Yes.
And it's already a pretty funny book. I was laughing out loud reading it, and I could kind of hear it in your voice too. But yeah, did you have to resist the urge to like not go for the bit all the time with it?
I think I addressed that right away, but then I was like, I can't keep talking about that. Like if someone actually is like taking the time to read this, like I should offer something besides the joke about how I do not feel capable of writing it.
Yeah. How do you feel now that it's done and published and it is a thing in the world? Do you feel any differently?
I don't know. As someone who has never, it's like my first book, and I've had other things come out in terms of like I do stand up, and I've had TV sets come out or acting roles, and it feels something about a book is so personal that it feels like once it's out there, it does feel a little bit like you like ripped your heart out of your body, and you're like, what do you guys think? You know, like
I have no idea what that is. No, I don't know what you mean. It's a completely foreign feeling.
Yeah. Any notes? So I
Any
think,
notes on my heart, on my soul.
So I think I've had to like detach a little from the feedback, because I think, you know, your relationship to something you write is always going to be different than someone who reads it.
Absolutely. And on the flip side of me thinking, hello, welcome, 2016. On the flip side of me thinking my editor was an idiot for liking the book, I will then do things like when I get a shit review, I go and look at books that I know are objectively good and look at their, like I went,
for sure.
I looked up like Joan Didion on Goodreads and saw some people saying horrible things about her books. I was like, you're just wrong.
I know.
Which means they might be wrong about me.
I know. You're like, if Margaret Atwood got a 3, like I'm not doing so bad.
I got a 1-star review from a lady who did not like my use of the C word.
Okay, but that's, I mean, that has nothing to do with skill level.
Ironically, she is one.
But
there we have it. That's
wait, I have a question though. Do you read your bad reviews, or is it just if you happen
I love them.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I get great mileage out of my bad reviews.
Like you like to use them to turn them into something,
or just laugh at them. I just like I don't know. I've posted them too.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of like, 5-star review, 4-star review. Aren't I great? And then every once in a while I want to throw in like, here's a 1-star. This bitch was bored. One of them was just 2 stars, bored. All caps, exclamation mark. And I'm like, because you have to, you know, you take the good with the bad.
No, that's good.
And I'm not for everyone. And like I always say, you know, like I don't really like chocolate ice cream.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's bad, right? So, audible gasps. Yeah, like I would prefer strawberry. But that doesn't mean chocolate's bad. So that's how I try and look at it.
I think I'm fine with the like theoretical idea that I'm not for anybody, but I do not need to see it in print.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Also, my bad reviews haven't been horrible.
Okay.
It's not like you know, when we talk about don't read the comments, and I know that you read your comments. Not sure. Why would you say that? Aparna, I called you Nancherla. I'm so sorry.
We know each other really well.
We're on second name. But yeah, I don't really read comments on videos and that kind of stuff that go up now, because I think it's also like here's the thing, if someone has taken the time to read an entire book and they have thoughts on it, I'm like, that's valid.
Yeah.
You know, I'm gonna give that the time of day. But I do feel like the anonymous internet troll is a different person who I'm not.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm
really.
also suspicious of anything that only has good reviews.
Suspicious.
That makes me question it. You know, I'm like really?
Paddington 2. You're like, really?
Yeah. I'm like, nobody saw the undercurrent.
No one hates this bear. This adorable bear. Something suspicious about it.
Wait, I have a question though. The book you're talking about, Out of Love, right? Your first book in terms of it being crowdfunded, and then
yes.
Okay. Do you feel differently about your next? Did you have a different process with your next book that's coming out?
Yeah, very actually. So the second novel is called Better by Far, and one hopes it is. Ha ha ha. How many times am I going to make that joke? Every goddamn time. Yeah, it was I think getting Out of Love off the ground felt so much more like a labor of love and a kind of an uphill battle. And I was going out to publishers, and every single one of them was like, but if it's told in reverse and they know the end, why will they keep reading?
Yeah.
No, thank you. So everyone said no to me. And that's when I went with Unbound, who, like I said, were crowdfunding. And it felt really like, and not in a bad way, it felt like I really had a community on board. I went out with it and I was like, listen, guys, I have to crowdsource this. If you pre-order, this is how I get to make the book. And it did, and the sales were really, really good. And it just felt like there was this whole team behind me of like thousands of people who gave a shit. So this time around, I think was probably a more easier in one sense, because Penguin were like, here's some money, go write a book.
Yeah.
But more lonely, maybe a little more isolated. I kind of felt like I was just
like writing
squirreled
in a vacuum.
away. Yeah. And like no one even really knows that like I'm doing this. And at the end of it, they'll just be one.
Yeah, I wonder if doing it with the crowdfunding kind of made it more communal, or like just
and
like it felt like people were invested in
and waiting.
Yes.
And wanted it.
Yes.
I think that was the big thing, because with this one, I'm like, does anyone want this?
Right.
Have they forgotten about me? Does anyone care? You know, am I gonna be locked in a room for all these years and then come out with a book and everyone's gonna be like, oh, who are you? Like, I don't know you.
I think that was a scary thing about writing too.
Yeah.
A book for me, instead of, doing stand-up where the reaction is immediate.
I was gonna ask, because you're right there. You're either getting the laughs or you're not. You know, if you're bombing or you're doing really well. How did that feel?
It felt like very scary. And I think it's like you were saying, like it kind of feels like if I'm not out there, will people remember me?
Yeah.
I think that's a feeling kind of all of us have with how online, how online everyone is these days, where it's like, if you're not posting, did you have that sandwich?
Did you have the sandwich? If a sandwich gets eaten in the woods and no one's around to insta it.
Did you eat it?
But yeah, Aparna, by the way, is a very, very funny comedian as well.
You.
I was also chuckling away at your stand-ups, just like doing my makeup, listening to you in the bathroom, just laughing away. But it's interesting how that's something I wanted to ask, actually, bringing the comedy to the page.
Yeah.
How did that translate for you? Because I kind of went from script writing into a book.
Did? Okay.
And that's a more visual medium into this. And you go from having your audience right there and being able to, I guess, perform the text into trusting that someone's going to understand it from a page, or get the tone of it from a page.
Yeah, well, I knew ahead of time that the book wasn't going to be like strictly comedic. Like I knew it was going to be kind of a combination of some stuff that's more serious in my life, just like with mental health and, struggles with body image. And so I knew it wasn't going to just be like comedic, light, fluffy essays.
Yeah.
And so I was a little worried of like how to balance that seriousness with jokes, because I also felt like I couldn't write something without any jokes. So I often had kind of conversations with my editor that was like, does this feel funny enough? Is it making too light of this subject? Like it was kind of tricky finding that balance sometimes.
It's something I think about and talk about a lot. That's sort of the Nora Ephron thing of like owning your story. And if I deliver it a certain way, now I'm not the victim. And I didn't get my heart broken. I'm actually telling this funny story about this thing that happened to me, and I get to tell it my way with my own ending.
Yeah.
Did you feel that? Because I know, like, what you talk about on stage, it almost feels, how do I put it? There's a flippancy to stand up that you don't have. There's a vulnerability with a book, and especially the topics that you're covering. You're talking about mental illness and eating disorders and body image and all that kind of stuff. Did you feel a catharsis in writing it your way?
I think I thought I would. That was the hope. I think sometimes I just got more in my own head, because I think you can sometimes go in circles with anxiety or depression where, you're like, but then why do I do this? Or like, why? And then you just kind of end up like a snake eating its own tail. But I do think I wanted to write a book versus, put some of this stuff in my stand-up, because like you're saying, stand-up does have, kind of the removal of its like setup punchlines, kind of this neat package. And it's kind of, there's closure at the end. And I knew with a lot of these topics in my life, like there isn't a neat ending. And I feel like with a book, you can kind of sit in that ambiguousness more. But I was worried about how that would be received.
How has it been received?
I don't know, because I don't read any reviews.
Of course. By peers, by friends?
Friends have been nice, but I think it is even scary to imagine your friend reading it and being
like, that's awful.
Yeah. Because they're like, I thought I knew this woman. And
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the thing of like, I would rather sing to 3,000 people than 3.
Yeah.
It's just that intimacy of like having a friend or family. Family reading your book and then asking you questions. And then in the new one, so in the new one, the protagonist's mother died when she was young.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm home recently, desperately trying to finish the thing. And my mother keeps talking to me, bless her, she's wonderful, I love her. And she's like, she walks into the room one day and just announces that I've killed her off. Well, I don't know, Hazel. You killed me off in this one. Okay, one, they're all fictional characters. Like, there's no two. That's it. They're fictional.
But if an author's mom reads their book, they're gonna be like, I'm the mom. I'm the mom.
Yeah. And she, in many ways very much is the mother in Out of Love.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing laughs over here. She is, and she isn't in other ways, but she saw so much of herself there. And that was lovely because it actually opened up conversations between us that I don't think we would have otherwise had. But yeah, she can't. I think the second one is weirdly at once more personal and also way more fictional.
Oh, interesting.
It's more removed from my life, and yet the feelings in it feel almost more personal to me. But yeah, she just can't quite get that they're not real people.
Yeah.
Like, I've killed her off. I'm like, you're not her.
I mean, I'm always doing that when I read authors like fiction books. I'm just like, oh, that's them.
That's that thing. That's that guy.
But yeah, I was going to ask, with your first book where you decided to write it in reverse, did you know that from the beginning, or was that a decision you made?
No, that was, I had learned to write you're adorable. She's trying to get the content, guys, because if we don't get the content, we weren't even here.
Exactly. How
will they know?
As we said.
How will they know? It's the sneak. Like no one saw because you were 1 foot lower. I love it. What was the question again?
Oh, just for Out of Love, the structure of it. Yeah.
Yes, sorry. So I had learned to write with short stories, and then I got into script writing for a very, very long time. So I was much more used to that. And then I wrote this short story about a breakup. It was just supposed to be a short story. I never knew what it was going to be. It was just one of those times when it just has to come out, and it wasn't a script. It just came out in prose. And showed this story to various people, friends, and my agent and stuff. And they were like, okay, yeah, bitch can write. Maybe could you do more? And he was particularly interested because he was like, money, obviously.
Yeah. Sure.
Book deal. He didn't love them when I wanted it in reverse and no one wanted to publish it, but he's happy now. Anyway, I wrote this story, and then it was that question of, can you make that a book? Could you go away and maybe make that a book? And I was sitting down thinking about it, was like, I can, but it felt so contained and wrapped up. By the end of that first chapter, they've gone through the breakup. She's done so much of her healing work. She's you feel by the end of that chapter like she's made that 1 cup of tea and she's ready. Yeah. And that didn't feel like the ending of the book, but it also didn't quite feel like a beginning. I didn't want to move forward from there. That just didn't really interest me. I think one of the big questions, I always say that, like, when you go through a big breakup or anything, you leave a job or an ending of a chapter, you sort of reflect on it and you wonder, was that good for me? Was that right? Particularly if it doesn't end well, like, was I happy there? Were we ever happy together? And there was all these questions sort of swimming around. And so I decided to answer them instead, and sort of then took the book backwards to do a sort of postmortem on the relationship. And look at 2 people who had fallen out of love in a sort of slow puncture way, because you often see in stories it's this one big inciting incident, or someone cheats, or someone shouts, or someone runs someone over with their car. It actually happens, but for it's not funny. He's fine. Was
it an accident or on purpose?
Anyway, but so the next thing I did was write the second chapter to see what it would be like to jump backwards. That little step, and then I wrote the very last chapter, which is the beginning of the relationship. And now I have A and B, and then I dotted about all over the place to get from there to there. So it was
I found it refreshing, because I think in my book I kind of talk about how I feel like as a society we love like an arc that starts like with someone struggling and then ends with triumph.
Oh, we love it.
And how that's like so often how life does not work. So I just am so much more interested in stories of failure, like the in between of figuring things out, than the like resolution. That I found that really like refreshing.
Thank you. Yeah. And same. I liked that bit when you were like, I'm interested in the failure.
Yeah.
You know, we see so much success, and we you know, I'm interested in the person who came second or third, I think is what you said. And I'm like, yeah, that's a more tasty story to me. You can really kind of like sink your teeth into it a little bit more.
Yeah. And I also think with success, sometimes it's like you think you want it. And I mean, obviously, I'm not saying nobody should get it or like it's not desirable, but you do get there and then you're kind of like, now what?
Yeah.
You know, like
absolutely.
It kind of can be scarier in that way.
Yeah, goals are awful. They're the worst thing, because I always think like you set these goals, like the big ambitious ones, the big ones, and I think you either don't reach the goal and then you feel crap that you didn't reach the goal, or you do reach the goal and you realize all your problems haven't gone away as a result of reaching the goal. So they're very tricky things, and you have I think it's taken me a whole lifetime of, I guess, setting a new relationship with goals, you know, and knowing that I'm going to put that there, but when I get there, let's set expectations around what that actually is. Like even with this, you know, my first book is going to come out, and then they'll know. Then they'll see, you know, and then all the movie deal will come in, and you know, and then they'll want the second book or the third book, and my life will change, and I'll have so much money, and none of that happened, and it's great. I'm not complaining. I loved it. I got to write a second one, but I think that was the level I needed to be at. Was life will stay pretty much the same, and then you'll get to write a second one, and that will be nice. And that's it.
I remember before my book came out, someone was like giving me advice who had a book come out, and they were like, it's not going to be as good or as bad as you think it is. Like, it's going to be fine. And sometimes that's like the worst thing to hear. You're like, fine. There's my blood in it. You know? Like, my blood is fine.
My blood's on the page. Speaking of your blood on the page, would you like to read some?
I can. I mean, speaking to what we were talking about, I can read from the end, sort of as an homage to your book.
Lovely.
Okay, so this is from the epilogue. It's called. The epilogue is just called "I Tried." So I'll just read a little section. I wanted to write this book to fix my imposter syndrome. I assumed I could write my way out of it. But that's like saying I'm going to sleep my way through this plate of food. When you try to write about your core insecurities, it turns out that sometimes they get louder. It's like all those horror movies where you're not supposed to touch the old relics. You touch the old relics, the spirits get pissed. You try to fix the mental demons, the demons create a mosh pit on your sense of self. But there is something I learned in this whole process, an epiphany about epiphanies, if you will, and please don't, I implore you. They don't arrive on a schedule, and sometimes you're the last to know you're having one, because epiphanies can take years to sink in. Yes, of course, there are those moments that strike like a bolt of lightning with accompanying thunderclap, but more often there is no fanfare. And usually you still end up needing to relearn the lesson again. But hey, at least you remember it better the next time around, what with everything looking so familiar, like a dream you've had many times before. That's what I've learned about my own imposter syndrome. It's probably never going to really go away, but I can remember I've been here before. I'm late to most things in life. My own self-discovery had to be one of them, if we're being on brand. This entire book has been an exercise in hesitation. I frequently felt as though the more of it that came together, the more of me that came apart. Yet here we are at the end somehow. Only there are no tidy conclusions, are there? Most everything I've written about remains open-ended in my own life, ongoing battles that must be faced and negotiated without fanfare. I wish I knew another way to do it, but this looks like it's it.
Beautiful. Yeah. It's so funny sometimes when you realize we could have been sitting here chatting about that for so long, and you've already you said it better already. You know what I mean?
No.
Like sometimes someone just puts something into words, and you're like, that was the feeling. That was it. I just hadn't quite hit on that yet. But yeah, that's beautiful. And have you made peace with that? Like not?
Yeah, I think at first I didn't. Or I mean, I did with myself, but I think even in putting it out in the world, I sort of had that same feeling as you of like, now people will really get me. They'll like read what I said, and then they'll like finally get. But part of the book is about how I've always kind of felt like an outsider, and I think it made me realize that even writing about it isn't necessarily going to take that feeling away. But it is going to, hopefully connect with people when they read it.
Yeah, there's definitely There's the ups and downs. And it's interesting that you sort of said you didn't feel like you'd got the catharsis from it necessarily.
Yeah, but I think I also romanticize what catharsis should look like.
Right.
Like
we're
I
back
want
to the
it
goals
to be,
again.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I want it to be grand and like sweeping and
cinematic. Fixed.
Yes.
You want it to be fixed.
Yeah.
By it. Yeah. You hear people talk about writing it down and then they're fixed. And
yeah.
Like, but where's mine?
Whereas like, you know, sometimes it's like a feeling like personal growth will be like you're at lunch and you like look at an Instagram thing and you're like, I didn't feel bad.
Wow.
I'm better today.
That's huge.
But it's like 2:00 on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
You know.
But those are the little wins.
Yes.
Those are the things.
Yeah.
I didn't feel bad. It's such a huge
big.
Yeah. I think that's I hadn't quite put it that way before, but with writing this, that was a similar thing with, I guess, looking back at past relationships and the regret and the resentment that you still harbor and the anger and all of that. I think having to get inside the mind of a character who sort of represented relationships I had been in, men I had been with, having to sort of get inside his skin and sympathize, I guess, because you can't write anyone, villain or not. Not that I think he's a villain in this book, but you can't without really sympathizing and really getting inside the decisions that they make and why they make them. And I felt by the end of it, I was looking back more fondly at people, not just relationships, but just sort of people who'd kind of come and go from my life and friendships that had ended or whatever, things that had ended on bad terms, and just felt a little softer, I guess, about it. So that when their name did pop up, I just didn't feel quite as bad.
Right, like as charged.
It wasn't as raw, I guess. There was more of an understanding there for them.
Amazing.
Which I didn't expect. I think I expected a lot of like my own healing and a lot of more understanding about myself and my feelings. But like, even writing like the mother character, you know, like has kind of changed my relationship with my mother a little bit. Wow. And even my sister and everyone in it, I think, except for one person who's still not very nice. Who shall remain unnamed.
Do you want to read from your upcoming book?
I would love to, yes. So I have a copy of this one, but I don't have a copy of the new book because it doesn't exist. 2 people in the world have a copy. It's Matt Haig and David Nichols. Oh. I made one of them send me a picture of him last night.
That's exciting.
I said, could I see her? Is she safe? Is she well? Have you made her tea? He's like, I have not made tea yet. I will. But so I'm going to read from the new book, but it will be from screen, which is the only way I've seen it so far. I can't wait to have it in my hands. I'm also not sure how much to read, so I'm just going to start reading and I will stop at a time when it feels like it's appropriate to stop. This is the very beginning of the book. It's this chapter is called Till February. And I'm about to get way more Irish. Expect it. By the end, I'll be back in full Dublin. I'm supposed to be writing a book, but instead I find myself writing to you. I prepare the blank page, ready to pour myself onto it, but all that comes out is your absence, which feels so much more like a presence. How odd that the language of grief is one of loss. People describe feeling empty, hollow, carved out, when for me, grief is heavy. There's a weight to it, a density. In Irish, we don't say, I am sad, we say, tá brónaram. There is sadness on me. And we don't say someone is grieving, we say they are fuivela, under grief. The phrase going into mourning literally translates as putting on a robe of sorrow. We wear our feelings, wrapping them around ourselves like cloaks that separate us from the world, and grief is the heaviest one of all. Today, unsatisfied with simply weighing me down, grief finds a way to slip inside me, filling me up like some tar-like creature that clogs my throat and lungs and crams itself into the cavities between my organs. You've only been gone a few hours and already I am turgid with the lack of you. I say you're gone, but you're not really, not yet. Your clothes are still hanging in the wardrobe. Your CDs are stacked alphabetically on the shelf above the stereo. Your squash racket is over there by the door. You said you wouldn't need it this week. You even left your passport here in the top drawer of your bedside table. It occurred to me just moments ago to check if it was there, and I must admit my relief at finding it. Not that it matters where you are, I suppose, if we won't be seeing each other anyway. It's just easier knowing you're stuck here too in drizzly, dark Dublin, where places carry with them reminders of me, and not sitting at a table by some quaint town square in Paris, perhaps, or maybe Croatia. Yeah, that feels right, Croatia, with its mild evenings, cobbled streets, and local beer on tap. Local women too. All of them perfect in your eyes because you don't know them yet. Haven't fought with them yet, haven't seen them sick or sad or suicidal. Perched on the edge of our bed with your passport in my hands, I picture one of these women approaching you with an easy smile all over tan and oodles of sympathy for the broken-hearted boy reading a book outside her favourite cafe. I let myself linger on the scene for far too long, right up to the point where you wake up, face down, ass out, legs tangled in her ridiculously white sheets. The whole scene is, in fact, impossibly white, bright to the point of overexposure. She opens her eyes, stretches her long limbs, one corner of her mouth curls up. Good morning, she purrs. Stop it, I tell myself, flinging your passport back in the drawer. He isn't in Croatia, he's in his brother's filthy flat in Lucan. Unfortunately, knowing a story isn't real doesn't make the feelings it evokes any less real. And so I'm left with all the jealousy and rage churned up by my own pathetic work of fiction. Why can't I write an actual work of fiction? A real writer would spin this breakup into gold. A real writer would chew it up and spit out a novel so magnificent it would make all the heartbreak worthwhile. Cure it, even. A real writer would sell 1 million copies and buy herself a mansion paid for with pain. My shoulders slump forward, like my skeleton has suddenly vanished, leaving the vague shape of a human behind. I slide slug-like onto your side of the bed and instantly begin to cry. It's not a particularly loud or deliberate cry. My face doesn't contort or change. I just stare at the wall as tears flow involuntarily down my face, like blood pouring from a wound. I hate these walls, these bare eggshell walls. I hate the potential I saw in them.
Oh.
She's so sad.
No. I just feel like I was so in the scene. Yeah, your writing is just so evocative.
Thank you so much. It's so strange as well to know that people are listening to an audiobook and hearing my voice in their ears. I don't know why I can't get my head around this particular thing. But it's probably the nature of it, like the first book being so personal as well. Like, I don't know. It's crazy. It's just crazy. I don't like, it's so hard to put my finger on it. Like the idea that someone's like lying in bed in the dark, snuggled up. And I'm there, like in their head, in their saying like kind of intense shit.
What would your like 15-year-old self think? She'd be like, yes.
She'd probably be delighted. Yeah. I have to do that regularly. Do you ever do the what would baby Aparna think of?
I do. I have such a weird relationship with baby Aparna because I think she'd be like, who are you? You know, like
really?
Like if I visited her from the future, she'd be like, oh, I don't know you. But not in a mean way. She was just on a different path.
Do you think you guys would get along?
Yeah, I think we just have to, warm up to each other.
Yeah. I think weirdly, I sometimes think about that interaction. I'm like, I feel like I'd get more out of it than she would.
Yeah, me too.
You know what I mean?
Me too.
She was probably fun. She was probably kind of cool. I see it like when I'm hanging with my nieces or whatever. I'm like, I wonder was I like this? Because they're kind of cool.
Yeah.
And I look at my younger self a little negatively, some of the time. So I'm like, she probably was chill.
Yeah.
She was probably absolutely fine. It's randomly popped into my head because we're talking about our younger selves. The thing that really got me when you were talking about your imposter syndrome was how so you had developed an eating disorder. I'm laughing and that sounds so mean. You had developed an eating disorder. Classic comedy. And you went to a facility of some sort to get better.
Yeah.
And you felt like an imposter.
Yeah.
In the place.
I did because my case was not severe enough for me to be an overnight patient. So
that really tickled me.
They're like, you can be a day patient, but because I didn't live in that area, they were like, okay, we guess you can be residential because you can't commute too far. And I was like,
I just love that you were like,
I
don't meet the criteria for it's not bad enough.
Yeah.
If only it was a more severe case, it might be taken seriously. And it was just so funny that I hadn't really thought about imposter syndrome in the flip way.
I know.
Where we've all had that thing of like, well, I'm not that depressed.
Right.
Well, I don't currently want to die. So like, I guess I'm okay.
I've definitely had that thought with like anxiety and depression where I'm like, oh, she wears hers so much better. Such a better depressed.
Yeah. She's a better anxious wreck.
Yeah.
Than
Which I'm like, what a screwed up thought.
Or she's monetizing it better.
Yeah, exactly.
Or her joke about it was
merch.
Funny. Yeah, she's got anxiety merch. I'm looking at Anna now. You monetize your depression way better than me, babe. You're my goals. I have no idea what time it is. I have just been yapping. Oh, I have a phone.
Oh, it's 6:40.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Shall we throw it out to you, lovely lot? Oh, wow.
What was the most surprising insight for you both while writing?
That is a good question.
I'm gonna let you go first so I can think.
Surprising insight. I mean, I guess process-wise, if I have to answer, is like I think I really thought I would be one of those people who was like, I'm gonna go to the writing center or the coffee shop. I'm gonna write for 4 hours. I'm gonna do it every day, and it just never. I never ever did that. Like I would, write in little 15-minute chunks, or like I would have 2 really good days where I like got a couple hours in. But I think I just have to make peace with the fact that I'm not like a writer who can be really disciplined in the way that I think I want to be. Yeah.
That's a good one. I think probably more so with the second book, I'm realizing like sometimes how, I don't even know how to say this, how little control I have over it. Like how much sometimes I really do just feel like a vessel that things are flowing through. And that makes it sound like I'm kind of sitting there not doing anything. It's like, I don't know, it's this weird thing where it's at once like exhausting and taxing and requires so much like sculpting and molding and thought. But also I don't really have a choice where it's going. Sometimes it's like I start books, I start chapters, I start paragraphs, and I end up in completely different places to where I thought I would be. And I'm like, I guess maybe it's because it's a fiction thing as well. Sometimes the story was just taking me with it, and I was just there for the ride.
Yeah. Do you feel like that was hard ever? Like, are you someone who likes the control? Because I feel like that would maybe be hard for me sometimes.
It was hard to kill my darlings a little bit. I had a chat with Kaylee the other day about what the book originally was, and I was only in saying it, there was like this anecdote of this thing that had happened, and I was like, oh, that was going to be in the book, and I was like, how is that ever going to be? It's so far from that now.
Yeah.
And I was sort of talking about like how it began, what it was going to be, because it's so the new book is it's based on a couple who have broken up, but they have 3 months left on the lease on the apartment that they're renting. So they decide, we've all been there. I hope I'm not the only one. And they've decided to stay in this place for the 12 weeks, but alternate week on, week off, so that they're not in the same space at the same time. It's just like to figure it out, some breathing space. And it was going to be chapter on and off, her and then him and then her and then him every week, going back to the flat. And the more I was writing notes, I had reams and reams and reams of notes. And the more I was writing, it was all her. And that makes sense because it's me. But I was finding it so much harder to see it from her perspective. And also I kind of wanted her to come back to this empty place where we don't know, I don't know what he's been doing there all week.
Yeah.
And there are gaps. Like we talk a lot, I think, as writers about like, do you know your whole character's backstory? Do you could you answer questions about their personality that don't make it to the page?
Right.
And this one really feels like there's gaps for me. Like I'm with her in this, and I'm coming back to this apartment with her, and I'm finding like the whiskey glasses he used or whatever, and I'm like, what the fuck was he up to? And I really don't know. So it changed dramatically. And then the whole stuff about like her mother being dead wasn't going to be a part of it. It just I don't know. I don't know how to say it. Just like I started writing, I'm like, of course, she's lost her mother. That's who she is. And that I think removed her further from me as well. Yeah, good question. I feel like that would I just gone off on a mad tangent there. Any more questions?
Yeah, what is your advice for aspiring writers on getting published?
What's your name?
Oh, Ellie.
Hi, Ellie. Sorry, I should have asked up top. Advice for aspiring writers on getting published.
Yes.
Oh God, that's such a hard
one. I know.
I feel like you've done it both ways, so that is.
I also have to check my privilege, though. Do you know what I mean? Like I spent. Well, I don't. Privilege is the word. I was in the very fortunate position of having spent 10 years. Building up an audience online. And I did that with this in mind. I know a lot of people who wanted to make online content for so many different reasons, to get better at it, or to do that forever, or to be famous or whatever. But it was always for me, I am building a community of people who like what I do and will be there whenever I make the thing I eventually make. And I think in my head that was always going to be a film, and then it was a book, and that's great. But yeah, I was in that position. So it's really hard when people ask. I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I hate when celebrities, you know, when they, like we were talking about a thing before, but I won't name names. A celebrity who basically looks absolutely amazing because she's had a lot of work done and there's no problem with having work done, but she has attributed it to sweet potatoes. And it's like, that's,
you mean the changes?
Yeah. Right? And it's like, no, it's not what, you know, and it's almost like, I feel like, well, people who are like, well, just work hard, just get out there and do it. It's like, sometimes that doesn't cut it, and that's really shitty. I know so many writers who haven't been published, and they're amazingly good at what they do. And yet, truly the only advice I can give is to just do it and go out with the manuscript. That's the biggest. I think I'm going to do this with the next book. I've been fortunate that I was able to crowdfund out of love with only like 3 or 4 chapters written. And people just sort of trusted that I would do it. And then with the second one, I had 3 chapters when I went back to Penguin with it. And this time around, I'm actually going to write the entire thing before I go out with it, for various reasons. But that would be my advice, is if you have a story and you just write it. Because you can, you know, you talk about getting published, but like, what is it you want to
the goal,
right? That's the goal, but it's actually not. The goal is to write the thing. And I know so many people with book deals who can't write the book for various reasons. They're struggling.
Right.
So yeah, just write the thing. Just and learn along the way, and you might find it takes 4 or 5 years to write the thing. At which point circumstances may have changed, or you might be better positioned to get that deal, or to go to them and say, this is my whole manuscript. It's just a much better position to be in.
Do you have like a writing group or anything? That's one thing, because I'm not as much in the writing world, but I do know a lot of writers I know who have like, you know, workshop groups where they're constantly working with like writers they know and trust, who know their voice, who they can like run stuff by. I think it just helps to not like get help and like collaborate when you can, even with things that are like more solitary activities.
Yeah. That's good advice. I don't personally have that.
I don't either.
I'm I'm a very weird insular, like, don't look at it.
Yeah, I know.
It's
like,
not ready.
But I'm like, I feel like I need to challenge myself to get out of
there's
that
a few trusted friends who are either creators or other writers who I feel like when I'm ready with something, I can go with bits and pieces. But yeah, I tend not to work with a group, but I do find it helpful to do those like co-working sessions. And I know that like when I did my writing retreat, of which there are 4 people here tonight, which is so sweet. They were all at the writing retreat in Spain this summer. And then we've stayed on a WhatsApp group. There's like 28 people on this group, and we all like send each other little snippets from stuff we're working on. And I sent Pema my book, the new one, the other day. So yeah, and I trust these people. I trust their opinion. I trust their work. So that's good.
I
like
think
have people
having those kinds of spaces is important.
Yeah, for sure.
Hazel, I have a question.
Yes.
Well, I totally see.
Oh, hi. We spoke on Instagram.
Yeah.
Hello. Sorry.
I could totally see Out of Love in potential movies. I wouldn't rule that out. Indefinitely.
There's a whole thing there. Yeah.
But I wanted to know. You mentioned post-mortem, and that's exactly like the natural feeling that at least I experienced in a situation like that, and then having like the book go through that sequence that you kind of are experiencing as well. It really, I don't know, it makes you tethered to the book more addictively, I would say.
Thank you.
And the other thing I was going to mention was the beginning of this next book. I just found it really ironic that you started it, and you mentioned that you needed to write a book about this situation.
Yeah.
And I was just going to follow up with the question of like what the next book is going to dive more into, which you kind of mentioned briefly, but I kind of wanted to know more like the timeline, perhaps, and if it's related.
Oh, for sure, the timeline. And yeah, a few people Thank you. Good question. A few people have asked if it's, I guess, a sequel. It's definitely not a sequel, but it is. How do I put it? It's emotionally, to take your word, tethered to the first book, in that it is about an author who has written a book about a breakup, who now needs to write another book while going through a breakup, because that is something that I was doing with both, actually. Must stop having it. Although they're getting me books, so it's fine. Yeah, so it's tied to that, in that there's almost, in my head, Kate could have almost written out of love. And it's some other version of out of love in this universe. But for me, she kind of is the writer, at least in my head. She always was, that wrote that book, and I couldn't quite separate it. And that doesn't show up anywhere. It's not. Right. It isn't part of the world at all, except like one tiny little reference to Angel somewhere in there. But yeah. So the timeline is really that space between, and the whole thing came about because I was really interested in liminal spaces and liminality, and that those thresholds, those limbos between, especially with healing. So a liminal space can be anything. It could be a waiting room at a doctor's office, or it could be adolescence or an engagement. It's just this period of time where you're sort of finished being that thing, but you're not quite this thing yet. Yeah. And you're a little sort of unsure. You're reaching for the next rung, and you've let go of the last one. And I have found that a lot with healing, that when one thing ends and you now need to go through your healing journey, you're like, I was this role to this person. I was this thing, and I'm not that anymore, but I don't know what I'm going to be yet. So you're just, this strange period of time where I think we look at it so negatively a lot of the time. So I wanted to kind of look at the positive aspects and like the healing to be found in those, and how necessary those spaces are, as shit as they feel, how necessary they are. So it takes place over the period of time, that 12 weeks, which also coincides, and this happened as I was writing, which is crazy. They break up on Halloween, which is nuts, because then I broke up on Halloween.
After you wrote?
Things kept happening. We're going to talk. Things kept happening. It was so strange. But they break up on Halloween, which is... I could go on about this for ages. I'll keep it short. It's based on Samhain, which is an Irish pagan festival, which is where Halloween came from. But it's also the Celtic New Year, so it's the beginning of our year is actually going into the darkness of the winter, and it ends in February. And I didn't realize this, but that happens to be another festival called Imolc, based on Imulug, which means in my stomach, which is like a growth, a spring, a new sort of. Like a seedling bursting through the earth. It's that kind of time of the year. So the book takes us through the time of like the Celtic New Year to the spring and new beginnings and like seeds in winter. And I had no idea of any of this when I started writing it. But yeah, so that's the timeline, is that kind of like going into the dark. It's the real, like the literal like dark night of the soul, where she's in the darkness for the winter and then emerges in the spring. Or it doesn't.
You gotta read.
Maybe they all die. They're all robots.
Yeah. Hi. I'm very curious. When you guys look back on your projects, what do you think is the question that you're trying to ask yourself when you write these? I don't know. I feel like Hazel's maybe, how do I heal from breakup? But what's that central question, that subconscious question that you think your work is trying to answer?
That's such a good question.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like with my self-doubt, it is a little bit like, what are you so afraid of? Like there's just that constant feeling of, you're not enough, or letting people down, or like not deserving things. And it is like, what is that fear based in? Or like, what do I think is going to happen by embracing like capability, or like accepting what I have?
Have you answered it?
No.
It's okay if you
private. That's private, Hazel. No. No, I don't think. I think it's like one of those open-ended questions that you're kind of like, you learn, you learn some stuff in therapy, and then you're kind of like, okay, I think I'm a little closer.
More.
Yeah.
But it's that thing of the onion digging. I remember a therapist saying that to me before. It's like therapy is more like peeling back the layers of an onion. You never really, it just gets more and worse. Like you think you're going to pull back the veil and it's going to be better. And she's like, no, you're going to go much further down. But then I guess that will drive you through I do feel like there's even a joke at the beginning of Better by Far where she's on the phone to her agent and she's like talking about writing another book about a breakup, and she's like, I can't do it. I already wrote a book about a breakup. Yeah. She's like, yeah, because no other writer in history has ever done the same theme over and like Chris Nolan just keeps making the same movie. Song. Yeah. We keep gobbling it up, I think he likes time. It's difficult to tell. But yeah, I think for me I think grief is the thing for me that just keeps coming back. It's what is it, and it's such a analogous, strange thing to me. I want to understand grief. I think is probably the biggest thing I notice when I'm going through any body of work. It's the horror. It's like, how do you take the horror, the nightmares, the darkest possible shit and go into all the recesses. Sorry, I keep cursing. This is terrible. And what do you find in there? Not to force like good onto something bad or say that there has to be some good from it. You went through that pain to be better. It's not that. It's just really going in and really looking at it, like taking a good long look and seeing what happens, I think. Have we got time for another question? Are we good? Are you all good? Okay, great. Hi. Yeah.
Hi, I'm a big fan. My main question was, well, first of all, what most stood out to the book to me was that our heroine was unnamed. She was nicknamed Angel. And funny thing, his nickname for me is Angel. It's always hilarious.
Guys, it's not a big deal.
But I found it, they say that, there's a lot of unnamed characters in history, and they always say there's a meaning or a strategy behind that. Was there a symbolic meaning or a reason why she's unnamed and we're only given the nickname by her ex?
God, the deep cuts.
I know. Got some good readers
in here. Guys. Sorry, what was your name?
Ayla.
Nice to meet you. Again, I feel like the reason she's unnamed is she just was. It's another one of those things where I sort of felt like I didn't really make a choice. I was writing and writing and writing. It's all told in the first person. And I think I was a few chapters in before I realized she doesn't have a name. And I toyed with giving her one. There's even a scene where she has to write down her name and number for someone. And she's like, oh, pretty name. And I'm like, do I address it? Do I say what it is here? But yeah, there were a few. I think when it started to come to the point when I realized there were moments I could or should name her, and then I was trying to not. I was like, why are you forcing this, or is it something that's naturally happening? But it did just kind of naturally happen. She doesn't really have a name in my head. She became Angel through him calling her that, and then there's that scene in the beginning/end where you realize why, which I didn't know about. I didn't realize till I got to that. I rewrote that chapter, and then we had her dressed as an angel, and it was like, oh. So yeah, I wish I had a better answer for you. It's just that she's sort of anyone, and I think a lot of people have said that to me as well, that they've related to the book because she could be them, she could be anyone, that giving her a name almost detached her slightly from them, from the everyday average person or whoever it is reading the book. So I kind of wanted to leave her a little anonymous and let people have her, like let people be her or have her in like whatever way felt right to them.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking. Okay, last one. Hi.
Hi. So my question is, when you're writing about something that's so personal and so like challenging and deep, like how do you try to protect like your mental health?
So
complete breakdown.
Should just get my friends up here to speak about this one. Hey guys, how have I protected my mental health? She has not. Why don't you take this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. I think for me, when I was formulating like some of the chapters like around depression, anxiety, it was just like, just write it all out. And then, if you need to take some of it out or, make sense of it later, do that. But I wasn't like, I never kind of censored myself in the first stages of just like getting it all on the page. But then I think, in the editing phase, then I was like, is this, harmful to put out there? Like, what is the usefulness of like keeping this in versus taking this out? Like, does this make sense to a reader? Is this too internal? Like, I definitely wrote essays that were just like my depression. And like, my editor would be like, this is not about anything. This is just like, you are shit over and over again. So I think it is, you have to kind of, sometimes find those limits for yourself, because as someone who has never written a book before, I think for me it was kind of sometimes doing something and then being like, okay, that actually made me feel worse for a while, and maybe I don't need to go so much in that direction.
Yeah, I was doing a lot of therapy.
Therapy's great.
Therapy's wonderful. Pro therapy. The first one was way harder. I did feel the second book did not destroy me in the same way. But with the first one, I was doing some really deep work with my therapist at the time that coincided, and it actually ended up informing the book in some ways, to the point that the protagonist's attitude towards her mother changed significantly from one chapter to the next, because I had written it so out of order. And I had an editor's note that was like, this doesn't feel like the same character. And that was really interesting for me, because I was like, oh, I've done this work in therapy, and I think I'm viewing my mother a little differently now. And so she's come up this way in this chapter, and this way in this chapter. So there was things leaking in. But yeah, a lot of therapy and like having someone to speak to. But I think on the second one, it was more like, I think it was just accepting that was part of the process a little bit, and just letting myself feel the feels, and knowing that there would be days. I think protecting my time and space around writing. So knowing on the days when I'm going to go in or go deep or go under, as I say, I always I'll be like, I'm going under. I'll see you in 6 hours. When I surface, having nothing, no pressures on me, like knowing that I'm just in like a safe space with friends, and I can just do basic needs, just eat and sleep and really care for my body, because it's hard for my brain to come back out. But a weird little trick that I sort of learned on this one was I was putting Kate through a lot. And you'll see. And I felt really bad for Kate. And there was one day where I was just sobbing uncontrollably because she was having such a bad time. And I was doing this to her. And I just felt so bad that I wrote this whole thing about just like this nice day that she I was like, what does she need? What do you need? And she was like, I just want to go to the beach. And I was like, okay. So I just, wrote this whole thing that's completely not in the book and has nothing to do with it, where she just has a nice little day out and she feels really good, because I just couldn't bear it. I just couldn't spend another day in there with her. So yeah, we took ourselves off to the beach. We had a nice little day, and then I got back into it, which sounds probably mental, but these are the things you have to do, to sort of protect yourself. You do strange things. You find yourself doing strange things.
I love that.
I feel like we're probably gonna need to wrap up. It's just gone 7.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for all the questions and for coming along. I think there are copies, and we're gonna sign them. Is that a thing? Okay. Amazing. Oh, sorry. She must get the content.
Do we hold our books up?
Forever holding books.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Get closer. 1, 2, 3. Thank